keep the timer on. Right, hello. Good afternoon. Everyone had a good lunch? Hopefully had a heavy lunch and you'll sleep off on me at some point. And I don't have to bother. Thank you very much for being here. Where's Chris? Is Chris still around? No, he did his presentation and left, did he? No, all right. Well, thank you, Chris, for laying it up for me, because he basically told us that the UK gin industry is dying. So of course, Asia to the rescue. And that's pretty much what I'm talking about today. That's my joke bit. The caveat here, sorry, my name is Anand. I come from a little country called India. We founded, along with a couple of lovely people here, India's first craft gin distillery in 2017. And one of them, well, actually two of them you're going to be tasting today, but one during this session, one during another session with David. Caveat. At this point, yesterday I was in India, so I'm quite jet lagged and quite tired. And yeah, excuses, exactly. So if I fall off the stage or just blank out, just ignore it, right? Just ignore it. All right, so we do have some lovely samples all the way from lovely Asia. We will get to them, but the really exciting part, of course, the numbers and the graphs and everything, I'm going to get at before. Yes, thank you. All right, where's the clicker? Brilliant. Right, so we're going to try and talk about Asia, where it's at, what's happening there, what's really going on over there, and hopefully show you that it is, in fact, growing. But why should we care? Why should we care about Asia? Of course, UK is, done. That's one small reason. But there really is a potential then. Why is there a potential there? Some qualitative, maybe anecdotal facts. Number one, weather is absolutely perfect. Not ideal conditions for a whiskey on the rocks. A nice gin and tonic or a gin cocktail works beautifully. Anne will testify. And I'll point at Anne a couple of more times. It's great. So the gin and tonic was invented. It wasn't invented by us necessarily. We like to say, India invented the gin and tonic. We love taking credit, but really it was probably someone who looked a little bit more like that. Enjoying it more as well. He's probably having an RTD there, but yeah. A couple of years ago, it just used to be Shoreditch, right? World's 50 best bars. It was all just, this Shoreditch gang over there. And now it's a lot more going on in Asia. And it's really interesting to see what people are drinking as well. And yeah, we have a lot of people. Lots and lots of people. So there is massive, massive potential there, of course, to tap into, right? Sell 1 billion people a bottle of gin each, if, 1 billion bottles sold. Right. So what is Asia drinking? Well, the simple answer is, unfortunately, whiskey. But we don't like those people. No whiskey. No one in here likes whiskey, right? Wrong room. Of course, in the gin category, there is an elephant in the room, and that elephant looks like that. In fact, probably looks like that. We heard about Ginebra, and I've never, so in I think 4 years of coming to Ginposium, I've never ever heard of San Miguel, Ginebra San Miguel, and it's already been referenced twice this time. So obviously, there's a shift. We did try getting a sample of the Ginebra San Miguel in the tasting, but Pal just didn't allow it. Or we actually couldn't get a hold of the bottle. Otherwise, it would have been quite interesting. I thought that might be a nice, interesting point to start with. Has anyone actually tried the San Miguel? Yeah. Is it good? Of course you've tried it. No. All right. I hope to try it at some point. But basically, this, have you heard of this, by the way? You've heard of this, right? It's the famous, 30 million some cases sold. Though I heard Chris say 20, and everywhere I've read 30 million. But yeah, that's really what Asia is drinking when it comes to gin. It's fairly cheap, mass-produced gins, which are anywhere from $2 a bottle to maybe $5. There's another one in India called Blue Ribbon, which was basically, the reason we started making a craft gin was because we said that's the only option we have. Or, imported stuff like Gordon's, Tanqueray, et cetera as well. There was a big kind of opportunity in the middle. But again, that Blue Ribbon, again, in India is about $4 a bottle. Not the best gin necessarily in the world. We've definitely had better, and we aim to have better today. Fun part is here. So, of course, if you look at Asia, and whenever we talk about Asia, we love looking at the totals and saying, wow, 35 million cases of gin. But the caveat there is that one. Philippines. There's what, 31 million cases, and most of it is that San Miguel, Ginebra San Miguel. So, all right, let's take that out for a second. All right, we still have 3.5 million cases, still not bad, right? But again, there's another small elephant in there, and that is India. Most of that is at the low end, right? And why are we taking these out is because, most of us are not necessarily talking about, cheap mass-produced gins. We're talking about craft gins. We're talking about standard plus gins, right? Things which would be at least, let's say, 10 pounds, 15 pounds, something like that. So if that's the piece that we're excited about because that's value over volume, then let's take that out as well. What we've got is about 1.7 million cases, which is not bad, growing, and growing fairly well. I mean, if you look at the last 4 years, it's growing at a 10.9 CAGR, and the last 2 years, it's kind of spiked up, and it's going at about 22%. It's not bad. We'll come back to this, but actually I will at some point add back about 360,000 cases. I was talking about this to someone at lunch, just to take India as an example. In 2016, which is when we had not yet set up, I was still part of a bar. We were running a bar in Delhi called Perch. If you guys are there, you should come by. Great cocktails, good wine. Had to plug that in. Basically, at that point, the standard plus category, and again, by standard plus, I mean 10 pounds minimum a bottle and above, was only 10,000 cases. And this includes Beefeater, Gordon's, Tanqueray, basically all your imported gins. And below that was almost 2 million cases. So you have a huge disparity. All right? In the last 5 years, so 10,000 cases in 2016-17, 2022, that stands at 360,000 cases, the standard plus category. I'd love to say all of that is us. It's not. It's shared by a lot of craft Indian gin brands that have come out. You're going to be tasting 2 of them here. And yeah, the imported gins have done equally well as well. Bombay Sapphire has done exceedingly well, and worryingly this year, but let's not talk about that. Asia as a consumer, if you split that up, and this is exactly the point that I'm talking about, that the value and low price is really where it's the base of the pyramid, and that's huge. Out of 35, you've got about 33 million cases just covered right there, right? And of course, we know the low price is mainly Philippines, so again, we'll chuck that out, and we're left with the 3.5 million. If we just take standard, premium, super premium, and ultra premium, you see the kind of CAGRs that are reflecting there, especially in something like premium. We've got 185,000 cases growing at 51%, which is absolutely staggering. So clearly more and more people are drinking gin in Asia, and they're drinking not just more, they're drinking better as well. And we're seeing a lot of people come across from the whiskey category, the vodka category, even beer as well. So yeah, good place to be. Not quite doom and gloom, and hopefully Chris next year will show India in the green as well, so we'll find out about that. So as a producer though, what can we expect? There are quite a few producers that have come about in the last few years. In fact, while we were putting this list together, we realized that actually most of them have come about, not the established ones today have actually been founded 2016, 2017, and they've now gotten really in there, gotten their teeth into it and actually established themselves. So fairly young, right? What can we expect from them? Can we expect the stereotypes? Spice, lots of sweet, maybe some tropical fruit in there. Is it going to be subdued? Is it going to be explosive? Is it going to be well balanced? Well, we'll find out. So I'm going to move across to our very first gin. And this gin, of course, comes from India. And this is number 1. I have to say I made life a little bit difficult at the back because I changed up the order on PAL. So we've just gone and changed the order back here, so we're fine. Right, DOJA is really interesting. It's made in India. It's made in Goa specifically. Goa is a beautiful place, by the way. It's right by the ocean, great beaches, and now suddenly becoming the capital of gin in India. There's at least 15 different distilleries that are now there. So this is supposed to be, I think they call it 2 cultures in 1 sip. And the idea behind it is it's Indo-Japanese. The family goes by the name of, well, their last name is Anand, no relationship. And they make this particular gin where half the botanicals come from Japan and the other half come from India. So I'm going to talk about it from here. So the ones that they get from Japan come from this region called Wakayama. And they have yuzu, they have sancho pepper, which is kind of like Sichuan pepper. They have hinoki, cypress wood chips, and sugi cedar leaves. And from India, they have peppermint, which I really get a lot of. You have coriander seeds, of course. You get cardamom. Julia, you love cardamom. You're going to love almost all these gins. It almost became a theme, and I said, maybe is that a thing? Asian gins are all going to have cardamom, but maybe you've been around as well. Maybe you've been going around consulting them. Yeah. I got a lot of that feedback when we were developing our gin. And then there's fennel seeds in there as well. So what I find this gin to be, and of course I saw a lot of you have already tasted it, it's quite green. It's got a little bit of that sweetness coming across from the cardamom, but equally from the fennel. We use fennel in one of our gins, and it adds a lot of sweetness. So if you take a small sip, keep it at the tip of your tongue, you'll get a lot more sweetness there as well. Good? Yeah? Brilliant. Moving right along. Right, next is Peddlers. This is a really interesting one. I had the opportunity of trying this earlier in the year when they were across in Bombay. And of all the botanicals, the one that stood out for me at that point was Buddha's hand. Anyone seen the Buddha's hand fruit? Yeah, you've seen it? For those of you who haven't, it's weird. But that's what you expect, right? That's the stereotype. You're going to get these weird-looking fruits from Asia. Have you tried cutting into it? Anne, did you try cutting into it? Yes. Yeah. Did you get a lot of juice? All right, brilliant. It's really hard to actually figure out how to cut into it, but most of the flavor actually lies in the peel, so you don't really get much juice out of it. There's a fruit really back there. It's like a proper looking lemon with all of these things coming off of it basically. The other bits that are interesting is of course the Sichuan pepper as well, and the almonds. They were founded in 2016. The whole idea being, again, it's from Shanghai. They wanted to kind of create an ode to the peddler culture, the merchants who walk around with with carts, etc. So that's why they called it Peddler's Gin. They actually have a first distillation, and in the second distillation, they actually put in the East Asian mint and the Buddha's hand. So that's a secondary distillation almost that happens. So if you taste that. It's surprisingly floral, at least for me. And one of the things I realized was that the Buddha's hand actually is supposed to almost smell as much as a lime as a rose. So there's a little bit of rose in there as well, which just makes it odd. But you get that rose, you get at least the floral notes coming across from this gin, which at first glance you kind of wonder where it's coming from. You look at lotus, at least in my experience, whenever I've tasted the distillate of lotus, it's not as floral as you would imagine. It actually adds a little bit of earthiness. Tanglin. Singapore gin. Actually, Singapore for the longest time has had this really great bar culture that's come about, but they didn't really have a gin of their own to really talk about and use. Tanglin's come in over the last couple of years. They were launched, I think, in 2018. Tanglin actually is a region within central Singapore, which used to be where they would grow spices. That's where the distillery is based now, and they're doing fairly well. So if we try the third gin, that's Tanglin. Let me know what you feel. I'm going to go to the audience with this one. What do you guys feel about this? I actually wanted to start this one off with a joke. You know, what do you get when when an Englishman, a Dutchman, and what was it? I think, and two Aussies, they walk into the, because that's the founders. There's an Englishman, there's a Dutchman, and two Aussies that founded this in Singapore. And actually, during this entire process, we realized there's a lot of expats actually that have gone in and created these gins. So, which is strange again, because in India that's just the opposite. You know, there's almost no expats that have come in and formed it. So, probably goes to say a lot more about how difficult things are how difficult gins are to make in India. So none of you start getting ideas. Yeah? All right. What do you make of this one? Like it? Don't like it? Hate it? Yeah? It's all right? Anything in particular that stands out? Any botanical that stands out to you? Chili, right? Yeah. Get a little bit at the back. I imagine that comes from the dried chili seed, but in our experience, and I think the young ginger might have a lot more to do with that. We use ginger in our gins as well, but we realized that the fresh young ginger was actually almost too spicy for us. We weren't able to control it. They obviously have done a better job at it. We ended up using dried ginger, which actually gave more of a candied orange note to it. So that's that one. Next. How are we doing on time? Doing fine? Oh, yes, perfect. This one was really interesting. I couldn't really find too much about the founders or of the origin. I feel like it's a fairly large business behind it at some point. But the botanicals in here, it was almost Monkey 47 range. You have 28 botanicals, 22 of which are foraged or sourced from the Philippines itself. So they clearly have a lot of spice available to them. The botanicals actually include all of these things. Now, pomelo, of course, some of us have heard of, and pomelo actually is mentioned in the gin note as well. Thank you, Pal, for putting them together. Dalindel, I had not heard of before. Had anyone familiar with Dalindel? No? We'll take a look at that. Calamansi, I had heard of. Again, mango, I was quite interested because we actually use mango as well. Couldn't find out if they use fresh or dried or sweet or raw, but again, there is some interesting bit in there. Ilang Ilang, to me, was really interesting. I'd never had a gin with Ilang Ilang either. So I was really curious, and this was one that I'd never tasted before, so I tasted just before you guys came in, and it's quite interesting. There's a lot going on. Cheers. There's a lot going on in there, and a lot of it is very citrus forward. That's the Dalindel, which is basically a mix of mandarin and pomelo. So it's like a sweet orange, apparently, as it's called. So green on the outside, very sweet on the inside. Does anyone know what an ylang flower looks like? Yeah. Never seen anything like that. It looks beautiful. And again, it's hard to pick out the different notes because they've used 3 different types of citrus, but the citrus definitely does stand out, for me at least. And I feel this would actually make a really good gin and tonic, potentially. You guys are really quiet after lunch. You like it? Have you liked the 4 gins so far? Yes? All right. Okay. All right. Keep going. Again, most of these notes that we've got here come from their own websites, their own pages, so I'm not taking, credit or blame for any of that. Hopefully they stand true. This one's really interesting. Firstly, of course, I love the bottle. Again, it's one of the gins that I was able to try earlier on in the year. Saigon Baigur. Baigur actually is the name of the settlement where Saigon was earlier. So about 1,000 years ago, Saigon was called Baigur. As again, it's been really interesting to kind of explore all of these. The bottle is supposed to look like a dragon's egg, a mythical dragon's egg. So it looks beautiful. Also discovered that's probably one of the heaviest corks I've ever seen, and their research says the heavier the cork, the more premium the bartenders feel it is. It's probably going against all the sustainability things we've heard today, but there you have it. Works really well. What's interesting here is there's Buddha has a hand and lotus again, right? Similar to what we already tasted. Clearly, it's a combination that people are liking. But once again, for me, what really stood out, and I was glad to see that it reflected in the gin note, was the cardamom. Lots of cardamom in here. They've chosen to use, I think, black and green cardamom. So someone really at the distillery loves their cardamom. I don't actually. Dragon something, I imagine. No, unlikely. I don't know. Didn't say anywhere. It's quite herbal, actually. I'm surprised it didn't rank higher on the herbal side of things on the gin note. But again, that's submitted by the distillers themselves. I think the herbaceousness actually, for me, is coming from the star anise as much as it's coming from the cardamom as well. 5 minutes? Okay, perfect. Running right through. Right. Don't know about this one. This is us. This is another plug, if you may. Let me look at the notes. What do they say about this gin? So founded in 2016. This one was launched in 2018, June at Junipalooza, which is happening tonight, which is where we're going to run off to now after this. We were helped along the way. So I'm one of the distillers, the other distillers that you want to stand up? Sid, that's Sid, the one with the long hair. There we go. And we have a third one hiding out in Goa, actually doing the work still. The 2 of us are still here. We had help on this one because we knew nothing about distilling. We came in and we went to, well, David actually pointed us in the right direction, and we went to this little distillery called Bermondsey Distillery, where they were making Jensen's, and we met this lovely lady, Anne, who came across, for some reason, to sunny Goa for 2 months and taught us everything she knew about distilling. So if you like this one, you know where to come to. If you don't like this one, I will give you her number. Right, I think the different part about this one is we actually found a juniper that grows in India, specifically in the mountains, all across. So we source it from, just as much in Afghanistan and Pakistan as much as India and even Tibet. So it's all across. Again, juniper does not know political boundaries. All the other botanicals like fresh turmeric and Gondoraj, which is a line that comes from Calcutta, are found all across India. For all of you who are familiar with juniper, what it looks like, that's what our juniper looks like. Not quite as perfect and round and purple and pretty and everything, but it's really bold, really fragrant, really quite earthy. And we like that earthiness, and we bolstered that with some fresh turmeric in there as well. So that's what you should be getting when you go for a taste. Is that all right? Right. The next one is Kino tea. Now, Kino B, you guys might have come across before. Anyone tried Kino tea? Yeah? Okay, oh, wow, not bad. This one is interesting because, and I definitely wanted to include this because tea is, of course, as Asian as it gets, as much as, you all love to claim it. Tea is fairly Asian. And it's a botanical I've tried to distill as well, and it always ended up a little bit, oversaturated, like almost over-extracted, and I could never get the freshness from it, whereas when we tried Kino tea, we really loved it. They were able to get the freshness, and probably realized that that's coming across from the tencha tea, which is actually what we commonly call matcha. So matcha tea is beautiful, very green, very fresh, powdered, basically tea. So if you taste this, that matcha tea absolutely comes through. It's absolutely delicious. It's one of my favorite gins, and of course it's these guys won the International Distillers of the Year, and they beat us and a couple of others, other Australians, to it as well about 2 years ago, and absolutely well deserved. Finally, the last one. So the laws in Thailand don't allow them to say gin for whatever reason, so they have to say engineered alcohol. The other line you can read by yourself under that. I'll leave that to you. Have you seen that before? Have you tasted that before? No? All right. Good. We first came across it, and we'll do this together. We'll do this one together, so let's not sip ahead. We first came across it in Thailand, in Bangkok. There was a bar which we went to, I think, in 2014 called A.R. Sutton Engineers. I've lost a couple of people to it. I've lost a couple of people to this one. But they basically, inside the bar, they had a pot still, and they were using that pot still to basically make this. Now, the interesting thing is they don't actually use neutral spirit. They make their own base spirit, and that base spirit is made from coconut and pineapple. So a lot of the flavor profile that you get here, in fact, it's hard often if you just blind taste, you'll be like, is that gin or is that something else? So which is why we wanted to end on this one. So now if you taste it, there's a lot going on there. There's not too much on the juniper front on this one, as is probably the case for the first 7. But it's interesting because this is what gin can potentially be as well. It can exist in this form, especially if you're in Asia. So, yeah. Well, in conclusion, before the light turns red, and you're going to do that to me, right? Right now? All right, brilliant. In conclusion, what are Asian gins? Of course, they must have cardamom. But what we've seen is they're versatile, they're diverse, they're experimental, and at the end of the day, they're delicious, which is, I guess, important. I think there's definitely an element of, kind of embracing the cliche. So a lot of what we expected before, that strange fruit, spices, tea, maybe, it's there. But the way it's used is definitely, it's definitely awe-inspiring. And I think there's a lot more to come from there. Again, 2017, again, just to give you the example of India, 2017 we launched, Greater Than, which is a gin, which is our London dry gin. 2018 we launched Hapusa. There was another gin called Stranger and Sons. And then for the longest time, it was just these 3 gins. 2020 onwards, we've actually seen an explosion where now every month there are 2 new gins that are coming out in India. It's kind of like what was happening in the UK in 2011, 2012. So it's really an exciting time to be in India and to be in Asia. And the beautiful part is not only is that happening on the producing side, it's also happening on the consuming side, where because of bars, because of the way the bar scene is growing, because of general curiosity, possibly fueled by the pandemic as well, there is genuine curiosity and love for gin, which is growing. So while I may not want to directly encourage you to come and make gin in Asia, definitely send your gins to Asia. I think there's a case for potentially Asia to be the new frontier for gin. And pal, I'd like to submit possibly that. Thank you all. Any questions? Brilliant. Sorry? What's happening? Ginposium? I love it. Yeah, Ginposium. 3-letter word beginning with G. You have a question?
Anand, thank you for your presentation. Could you explain how easy it is to build a new brand in India? There are lots of craft distilleries coming through, but you've got a limited number of on-trade outlets, advertising restrictions. I assume you don't have the budget for an IPL team?
Not yet. Well, jokes aside, it is tough. I love talking to Americans because they love talking about how difficult their system is and the 3 tiers and everything. But at the end of the day, there is one document that summarizes the entire American excise system. There is not a single document you will find that will summarize thoroughly the excise system of any of the 26 states that you're allowed to sell in India. And each state in India has a different excise policy, different price points, different labels, because each label has to have different languages. There's a state, and again, I can go on for another half an hour on this. There's a state in India called Telangana where they said, hey, you can't list botanicals on the back label because you're trying to claim health benefits because of Ayurveda. And we're like, that's not what we're doing. So we had to literally black marker all the botanicals on that lot of labels and then just remove them from the next lot. So it's basically 26 different SKUs as far as we're concerned. And then for export, we just have one label. But it's tough. But I think it's also a really exciting, interesting place because while there is prohibition on we can't advertise, actually that's a great leveling kind of a thing between us and the Davids and the Goliaths, because technically Gordon's or Bombay or anyone could just come and advertise on TV and billboards, etc., and put us out of the game. We'd never be heard because we just don't have the budgets. But because they can't, we're then allowed to play on the same field, Instagram, which is also a bit of a gray area, but events, etc., and restaurant activations, bar activations. So if you make that effort, it's a really interesting place to be in. Thank you. All right, brilliant. All right, one question. This is a hard question, Anne.
No, it's just off the back of that whole thing around advertising and the ban on marketing. I know that some whiskey companies, from being in Goa, have produced their own mixing water, yes, and they advertise the water with the whiskey brand associated. Would you do that with the tonic water, and could you see that working in India?
We were really tempted at one point. So it's basically called surrogate advertising. The biggest example is there's a brand of beer in India called Kingfisher. If you've ever had, it's not bad. But they basically, as a surrogate, they launched an airline, a proper airline. And they ran it, and unfortunately ran it into the ground, and took the beer business with them. So it's really tough. Everyone knows what's going on, no one is buying, whatever, Johnny Walker water. Not that it exists, I'm just as an example. Everyone knows it's eyewash, but it still exists because there's a space for it to exist, and because, Bacardi music CDs was actually what started it. So thank you very much. And everyone just kind of followed. One day it was sipping on Bacardi rum, and the next day was listening to Bacardi tunes or something. And the advertising totally changed, and we were like, what happened? But yeah, surrogates are a big thing. Are we going to be able to do it? Unlikely, because for the surrogate, we need to show a revenue stream of 5 crores. What's that? 50 million? 5 million? Something crazy numbers, right? So let's say $5 million. We need to show a revenue stream of $5 million for the surrogate. So we're happy if we show $5 million for the gin. Right, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.